try again. There we go. I am absolutely honored to be here today. Sorry about the mic issue. That's the thing. But man, it is wonderful. Elijah's actually over in Vicksburg right now, kind of taking my place. So can we give it up for Vicksburg today? Let's go. Man, Vicksburg, I absolutely love you guys. Miss you guys. I'll see you next week. But man, what a great day it is to worship together. And I don't know so many of you, and I'm so happy about that. That is so cool because it's been over a year since I've been here. And man, things have changed. This church has grown, not just in this location, but over in Vicksburg as well. We are so glad to be one church in two locations. And what an incredible opportunity it is to be here with you guys today while Elijah's over in Vicksburg. Man, God is doing incredible things over there and all across central Mississippi. So, man, let's give it up for what God's doing at Foundry right now. Come on. Yeah. So we're in this Family of God series, and today I just want to kick us off with a little story, and this is the story of a girl. It's a boy. I'm the boy. It's my story, guys. So my story it starts a long time ago, and around 2012, which is wild because this was like 12 years ago, and I was like graduating high school, and I feel old now, but that's fine. So around 2012, I was talking to my dad. I was getting ready to go to college, and I was like, all right, man, I'm just kind of feeling some stuff, and I'm like, there are some worries that I have, and I don't remember exactly how it came up, but like loneliness came up. I was like, man, I'm going to be alone because I didn't go to college with all my friends. I went to college where literally I was the only person from my graduating class that went to this college, and I was like, I don't know anybody. And it is what it is. And I was talking to my dad about it. He was like, yeah, you've never experienced what it's like to be in a crowded room, in a room full of people, and to be completely isolated from them, to be completely alone. He said, you've never experienced that, I bet. And another thing that you probably will experience one day is even in your marriage, going to bed at night and even laying next to your spouse, the person you live with, the person that you do life with all day, every day, the person you're raising kids with, the person you're protecting and things like that. You can be completely alone, laying in bed next to your spouse. And at that time, it was like, okay, yeah, maybe one day. I'm not sure. But it's interesting because I've felt all of those things to this point in my life. And those words have really stuck out and rung out in my life in so many ways. Going through college, there were so many times I'd be in class or even with a group of people that I called friends at the time and all of these things. I'd be in a huge group of people and just, man, I'm so alone right now. Just utterly alone. Even in my marriage at times, and I know so many marriages feel this way. You could just be in bed with your spouse, and you're thinking, man, I just feel really alone right now. And it happens. And it happens. And I know that I'm not alone in this. And I just want to ask the question, have you ever felt this? Have you ever been the person on the outside looking in? Maybe you're alone in the fact that you want a family, and you're saying, and you show up to someone's house, and you're there with them, and you're like, man, I really, really want this. I really want this family. I really want something like this, and you feel alone in that. Or maybe you're looking at a community that you really want to be a part of, this group of friends. You're like, man, I really wish I could be a part of that group, and you're on the outside looking in. Have you ever felt like that? And I'd be willing to bet you have. According to statistics, the Surgeon General put out some numbers around the time of COVID-19, so in the last few years. He declared loneliness and isolation an epidemic. That's a thing. 50% of all adults in this country claim to feel alone. That is half of this room. That's half of you in Vicksburg. Half of all adults. So if you're married right now, you should talk to your spouse today about this because half of the two of you is one of you. Have that conversation. Do you feel alone? Because you're not alone in that. But we see a lot of issues with loneliness. A lot of the physical things are coming out. They're realizing that loneliness and isolation causes premature death, and it raises premature death rates by 29%. This is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That also creates a premature death rate that is increased by 29%. It increases the risk of heart disease and dementia and all these other really serious issues. And for older people, isolation and loneliness makes up $6.7 billion in Medicare. So this is a huge issue that we are facing as a country, as individuals, as groups of people. And it's cool because people recognize it. There's a Gallup poll that was talking about how important things are to people, and things that people find important lately are things like community. The need for community in people, according to this survey, has grown tremendously in the last 20 years. Their jobs have increased in importance. Their hobbies have increased in importance. And what do those things bring? They bring people alongside you doing things. So people want community. People want to be seen. They want to be heard. And this survey shows that. Another thing that is super interesting that this survey shows is that religion has decreased significantly in importance, according to people. So you start to ask yourself, and we're like, when you see this, if religion is decreasing, what does that really mean? It means people stop going to church. People stop having those communities where, for centuries, that's where people found community, was at church or in the temple or wherever. So we're seeing this, and people want community, but they're stepping away from religious communities in particular. So we have to ask ourselves, all right, if people are searching for communities, are they searching in the correct areas? Are they searching in the right places? We all know, and we've heard a million times, who you hang out with is important, right? They can positively impact you or negatively impact you. You can imagine yourself walking down the street with your friends, and you're just hanging out, and you're bebopping along and everything, and all of a sudden you hear some people shouting. You're like, oh, why are they shouting? And then more people are shouting, and then lots of people are on the street, and they're all shouting, and then you're shouting, and you don't know why, and then, somebody breaks a window, somebody's, running across the street with a TV, somebody's throwing a brick, and all of a sudden everybody's rioting, and you're rioting, because that's how things work. That's an extreme example, but that's how that happens. Riots happen that way. There's this thing called, I think it's group theory or something like that, talking about how people in groups do things together. It's a really fascinating subject, and there's that, but there's also something like maybe you're sitting at lunch with your friends and somebody starts dancing, and then everybody starts dancing around you, and you feel really awkward because if you don't start dancing, then they're going to stare at you weird because you're the weirdo there not dancing, and then all of a sudden you feel like you're in the 7th grade and you're not wearing pants and all that stuff, right? Like, it's terrifying. Like, dance mobs absolutely terrify me, guys. So anyway, there's that. It matters who you hang out with. It just does. And we all know that. We've heard about it our whole lives. A lot of people in public schools, you went to DARE programs or something like that, and they were like, if you hang out with drug dealers, you're going to do drugs. Right? Like, that's how it goes. Right? The people you hang out with influence you big time. Elijah talked about this last week. So go check the podcast out if you haven't already done that. So the goal here is to choose the right community. It makes sense, right? If we're thinking about this logically, the goal is to choose the right community. Set your sights on a good community, particularly if you're serious about God and you're serious about what God says to do and you're serious about living for Jesus, then you want to pick a Christian community, particularly maybe a thriving Christian community. But the question is, what does a thriving Christian community look like? What does that even look like? And luckily, we have an incredible example in Acts to talk about this. So if you've got your Bibles, turn to Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2, we're going to be in verse 42 to kick us off here. Acts chapter 2, 42. And it says this: and they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And this brings us immediately to our first insight for what a thriving Christian community looks like. This word devoting is a Greek word and is written in such a way, there's, you get in all the grammar stuff that you think about when you're a language Nazi. So what it says it literally translates to, they were continually devoting or persevering together. They were continually devoting themselves. They continually persevered, or they continually were giving their constant attention to. There's this concept of they were doing it nonstop. This wasn't something that they did on Sundays and then again on Wednesdays, or on Sundays and then again in their Foundry group and then again later, maybe once or twice. No, it was an all-day, everyday thing. They were continually persevering together. They were continually devoting themselves to certain things together. And one of those things they were devoting themselves to, in this case, one is the apostles' teaching. And what were the apostles even teaching at that time? Well, you can see pretty clearly in just before this passage in Acts that Peter was very obviously, he was just teaching Jesus to these people who didn't know Jesus, to the people who were persecuting Jesus. He was telling them, hey, you guys persecuted Jesus, and he still died for you. So it's time to repent and turn to him. And that day, it says, about 3,000 people were added to their number. 3,000 people that one day were added to their number. So this community was a large community, over 3,000 people, and they were all added to their number. And they were all continually devoting themselves to these apostles' teachings and to the fellowship. This word, fellowship, koinonia, is a Greek word that could also be translated community. They were devoting themselves not just to the apostles' teaching, but they were devoting themselves to the community. They were devoting to themselves to the breaking of bread and to the prayers. And, a lot of scholars think that these words, the breaking of bread and the prayers, were references to some of the traditions that had already been set in place at that time for the Jewish community. The breaking of bread would have been Jesus's, where he was at the Last Supper and he broke the bread and said, take and eat, this is my body broken for you. Some think that is the case, and the prayers were probably Jewish prayers that they all knew at that time. Other scholars think that they were just eating dinner together and praying together. And later in this passage, you can make that really work out. So, in any case, they were sitting down at the table together, eating together, talking together, doing life together all the time. They were continually devoting themselves to it. We can see this in our current culture now. We see communities of people constantly devoting themselves to something. And what is that something? A lot of times, you pick out your pockets communities. Star Wars fans are always thinking about Star Wars, and every conversation you have turns out to be a Star Wars conversation somehow. You never know how. It's just like Jar Jar Binks is eventually mentioned, and it's just like one of those things. Lord of the Rings fans are the same way. Every message that Elijah preaches has Lord of the Rings references in it, and that's okay, right? Like, this is the way that communities live. When you have a hobby, when you have a sport, when you do whatever it is, and you're in a community, you think about that thing all the time. Taylor Swift fans are the worst about this right now, especially. Man, you don't want bad blood with those Taylor fans either. That's not a pun. I guess it is now. But let me tell you, they will go hard in the paint on some Taylor Swift. Last year, on average, Taylor Swift fans spent between $3,000 and $16,000 on Taylor Swift, between outfits and travel and concert tickets and all this stuff. It is wild. And they always talk about it. You mentioned eras, and everybody are you Swifting right now? I'm not even playing right now. That's what they're doing all the time, having that conversation. And you can have that. I made that one up. So Swifting, it's not sweeping. Anyway. All right. So we continue in Acts because these people are continually devoting themselves to these things here. And in Acts chapter 2, verses 43 through 45, it says, "And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need." The second insight that we can see from this thriving community is that they were all embracing an outward community focus. They were embracing an outward community focus. One of the greatest marriage pieces of marriage advice that I have received to this point is, and it sounds kind of strange, and that's why you remember it, is your spouse is not your purpose. And what that means is you can't count on your spouse to make you happy, because they're not going to. And it's not fair to them to put that on them. But your spouse is not your purpose. And the purpose that you and your spouse need to have should be outside of your marriage. For instance, Molly and I, our purpose together individually is to plant churches. We got married because we knew that we could do that better together. So that is our purpose. It is outside of our marriage. And when you have a purpose outside of your marriage, you don't fight as much a lot of times, especially about the tiny bickery things that a lot of couples fight about, because you're not fighting with each other and against each other. You're fighting towards one goal together. You know, a lot of people have talked about, I think it's called Plato's triangle. A lot of people are calling it the marriage triangle now, where you have you at the bottom of the triangle and your spouse at the bottom of the triangle and God's at the top. And the closer you two individually get to God, the closer you get together. Right? That is a thing that people talk about. And it's true. It's having a purpose and saying that God is your purpose individually. And as you pursue that, you're going to get closer together. Well, this community here is no different. These guys were fully embracing the work that God was doing already. They were fully embracing the move of the Spirit in their lives individually and collectively. And the Spirit of God was blatantly working through the apostles, doing signs and wonders. We would call them miracles today. And we see that, and this word wonders is literally just a thing to behold. Something that makes you go, whoa, what was that? That shouldn't happen. And this is the thing that the Spirit of God was doing already, but maybe not so obviously, the Spirit of God was nudging this community, these 3,000 people, to let go of their worldly possessions, to let go of their stuff and sell it on Facebook Marketplace and take all those proceeds that they get from Facebook Marketplace, and then they give that away. They don't even keep that for themselves, but give that away so that no one around them had need. This is what the Spirit of God was doing in this community. They were all embracing it. It's incredible. And they were all together, and the word says they had all things in common. And every time I've read this for most of my life, I've thought this was talking about like your personality. So like the things that we have in common maybe are like, oh, we have this church in common, or things like that. And like, if you want to be friends with me, like I like disc golf and I like yo-yos. I'm super into chess right now. And I plant churches and I have babies. And it's, if we want to be friends, like, let's be friends. I have those things in common. So that's not at all what this is talking about. What this is talking about is their possessions. It's saying that my stuff is your stuff. And in the South, we know this pretty well. If you come over to my house, you're going to get fed. So my food is your food now. And you just rummage through my cabinets, and that's okay. And I can't tell you how many times in my life this stuff has happened. Like my sister-in-law called me the other day, hey, I'm coming to get your chainsaw. Okay. I called her back, hey, I'm coming to get your lawnmower. So that's just how we are. That's how the family is. My stuff is your stuff. We borrow each other's stuff. And we don't care about our stuff because we're not worried about our worldly possessions. We're worried about what the Spirit of God is doing in this community and taking care of the needs of others so that no one has need. This is what this thriving community was embracing, was the outward community purpose. That's what they were embracing. And we continue. Acts chapter 2, verses 46 through 47. And day by day, your translation may say, attending the temple together, but what it actually says is continually persevering with one mind. Continually persevering with one mind, they were going to temple. So this is, again, you see this continual aspect. It's something they were doing all day, every day. They were getting with their friends and, hey, let's go to the temple. Okay, but they weren't just going to the temple to hang out. They were going to the temple with one mind. This word with one mind is hamathumadon, which Elijah mentioned a few weeks ago, actually. And it's kind of like having the same anger towards something. That is one way to translate it. In this case, it's just they had the same mindset going into this, They were going into the temple to do one thing together with one purpose. They were embracing their community's outward purpose already and doing it all the time. This is something that we see iterated here, which means it's really important. That's what they were doing. But day by day, they were attending temple together and breaking bread in their homes. They received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all people. And this is our third insight. They ate together and were happy. And that sounds wild to know that a thriving community, what does a thriving Christian community look like? It looks like a community that hangs out together. It literally they get dinner together a lot. You know, when you see a group of people that are really happy hanging out together and they're eating food, you're like, man, that looks cool. I want some of that. There's something about food. There just is. And man, it's one of my favorite pastimes in the world is you come over to my house, I'm going to feed you. Even if you're not hungry, you're going to eat a Pop-Tart or something. You're going to eat something. It's just, there's something about eating food with another person. I had a really, really good friend of mine. He's one of those people that are just naturally wise. And his name is Cody. It's not me this time. It's a different guy, I promise. But one of the things he told me one day, we were just talking, it was a normal conversation. He said, most days, eating with someone is the most vulnerable state you'll see that person in that day. Because we all have to eat or we die. I was like, that's an interesting thought. And the more you think about it, the more profound it kind of actually is that you can't be terrifying if you're just eating a meal with someone, right? It's hard to be angry and eating a meal with someone you're sharing a meal with at the same time. Yeah, it can happen, sure, but it's really difficult to do. So share a meal with someone, right? That's what these guys were doing. They were eating together, and in so many ways, this passage reminds me of Foundry, particularly Foundry groups. You see Foundry groups all the time out here, and in Vicksburg, we got Foundry groups like crazy, and so many of them center around a meal first. Why is that? It's because when you're eating with people, you're having a good time. You're having conversations. You're getting to know people. You're starting to see the needs that they have and how you can be vulnerable with each other in this small way. And when you can do that, when you can be vulnerable with them in a small way, you're in. You're a part of that community all of a sudden. And you get these little pockets of communities and Foundry groups, and they come together to church on Sunday, and then all of a sudden we're a big community. One of my favorite things to do back when I was here every week and as often as I can in Vicksburg, after church, you go get lunch with a group of people. Those are some of the most fun days of my life was after church, we just round up, hey, we're all going to this place. Show up if you want to. And we'd have 15 to 25 people there sometimes. It was nuts, and man, it was so much fun. But this is the thing that they were doing, this thriving community. They ate together and were happy. And they were having favor with. They were having grace for all the people around them. Again, we see this outward looking experience from this community. A community that is inward looking is not a thriving community. It's a dying community. A community that is outward looking, pulling other people in and saying, hey, come be a part of our community. That is a thriving community. And I say it all the time, and I'll say it probably forever. Foundry is one of the greatest communities you could be a part of. It really is. And I believe that because it's my story. And it's because of the people that make up the community of Foundry. Everybody, most of the people at Foundry have this one understanding. And this understanding is that stepping into a thriving community looks like owning that community. It looks like owning your community. That's what stepping into a thriving community really looks like, is being a part of it and not just taking from the community And sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes you got to be there and rest while other people take care of you, and that's okay. But eventually, you need to be the one to take care of somebody else in that community. You got to own that community. And whether you choose Foundry to be your community or not, here are some steps. Here are some ideas and thoughts about what stepping into a thriving community are. And none of these are particularly brand new, because I'm just going to copy paste everything I've talked about so far. One is continually persevere together. Step into the community and continually persevere together. Continually devote yourself to the community. When there are worship nights, show up. When there's a Foundry group, just show up. Man, you're tired. Persevere through it. Continually persevering. That word persevere means that there is going to be hardship. It's not always going to be easy, but you continually devote yourself to it. And when you do that, it's incredible. Community is one of those things, like so many other good things, you're only going to get out of it what you put into it. So if you put in a little, you're only going to get out a little. If you put in everything, you're going to get out a life change that you could never have dreamed of. So you get out of it what you put into it, and you can ask yourself, what am I continually devoting myself to? Maybe you're continually devoting yourself to work or bills or whatever it is because you're stressed and that's just the way it is. Sometimes that's the way that we live. We're continually devoting ourselves to that and not to a community that can help us out of that, because we don't see that there's a fix over here because people care about me. So I'm going to go focus on this thing and do it all alone and isolate myself. What are you continually devoting yourself to? What's the thing you're thinking about all the time? And you can ask yourself, am I even willing to persevere with these people around me? It's an important question to ask. Are you willing to be a part of the community? And then fully commit to life together. Fully commit to being a part of the community, the group of people around you. Get to know their names, get to know their stories, get to know their backgrounds. Go eat dinner with them sometime. Fully commit to life together. And the second thing that you can do to step into a community is embrace the outward community's purpose. Embrace it. Embrace the mission of your community. So you got to ask yourself, what is this community's purpose? For some communities, that community's purpose is to show up and run 10 miles. Okay, you can do that. That's okay. And then those people who run together often hang out together a lot, and that's cool. But if that's their only purpose, then that probably eventually gets old. You hurt your knee, and then all of a sudden you can't be part of that community anymore. You know what I'm saying? But what is the community's purpose? These people who were here in Acts, they were constantly in awe because of the work that God was doing. They were constantly in awe of it. And they shared everything that they had so that no one had need. That is a purpose worth having. That is a purpose that is outside of ourselves and that will eventually grow the community. So I'd say this: go find a need in your community and fill it. Go find a need in your community and take care of it. Take someone that needs something and go take care of that person. Do it together. Bring a part of your community with you to do that so that you can be an outward-focused community. I had a conversation with someone this week who needed their house cleaned out so they could move, and there's a lot of stuff in their house, and they're really overwhelmed by it. So I said, hey, we're going to get a group of guys together. We're going to go to your house, and we're going to help clean it out, and we're going to do it. Because there's a need, and we have the ability to fill it, so why wouldn't we do it? This is what being a part of a church is all about. It's what about being a part of the family of God is all about, is helping those who have need. So if we can, why wouldn't we? Those are the big questions. So I want to invite you now to join in with the mission of Foundry, to lead people to live in love. Yeah, like Jesus. Bixbury, y'all said it too. Lead people to live and love like Jesus. That is an outward focus. How did Jesus love? If we're going to lead people to live and love like Jesus, what was Jesus' life and love like? It was self-giving. It was sacrificial love, putting himself to death for others. This is the kind of things that we got to think about as a community if we're going to do this successfully and thrive in it. But the third thing that you can do to step into a thriving community is eat together often as possible. Go get dinner with somebody. Tell them, hey, come over to the house. We're going to eat together. Man, we love doing this at my house. Like, hey, we're cooking dinner. Y'all come get some. So do it. Invite somebody out this week to dinner. Invite somebody to coffee. Go eat a meal together and do it often. The more you eat together, the more ingrained this idea of community is going to be. And you don't have to go spend a whole bunch of money in restaurants. Like, invite them to your house and like make some peanut butter sandwiches and just enjoy each other's company. Like, that's a real thing. You can just do that. It ain't got to be excellent every single time. It's the purpose of community there, not the food. In Acts chapter 2, verse 47, it ends like this. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. We see these words day by day in verse 46. We see that day by day this community acted. They were continually persevering with one mindset, going to temple, to eating together, to praying together, to praising God together, to giving grace to all those around them together. And day by day they did that. And here we see God's response day by day. Day by day, he added to their number. So we see something interesting here. When your community is aligned with God, God responds. When your community perseveres together, the Spirit moves. When your community embraces God's mission, people are taken care of. And this is my story. A long time ago, I was alone. I moved down to Jackson. I didn't know anybody. I was completely isolated from friends and family. I was depressed. I was anxious. It was so bad. It got like my anxiety got to the point where like I couldn't approach people because of the anxiety that I had felt towards any conversation with somebody I didn't know. It was absolutely just gut-wrenching, that time of my life. And I was eventually I got so tired of it. I said, God, get me out of this. Help me out. Show me a way. I said, if you show me this way, if you'll lead me out of this, I will commit to whatever you have in front of me, and I'll do that nonstop for the rest of my life. And a few weeks later, he did. I got an invite to Foundry. It was launch Sunday. It was day one of Foundry, which was incredible. And there was a moment before I walked in to Foundry that first day. I was sitting in my car, and my anxiety was just, it was nuts. It was raging. But I told God I would do it. I told God I would commit. And in that moment, I had a choice to make. I could go back to my isolation and be comfortable in my isolation, because at that point, it was just comfortable. It's a lot of isolation is for so many people. It's a lot easier to be alone and comfortable than to step out sometimes and feel that social pressure and things like that. And like, am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to do the right thing? You just got to do it. Because what happens is when you step out, and when I walked into the door at Foundry, I met Elijah. I met Molly, who's now my wife, and we got a bunch of babies together. I met the people who helped build this church. And then I took that same community and we moved it over to Vicksburg. And now other people's lives are changing because of it. Because one decision that I made to step into community and to fully commit to it, to fully own it. And because this community was aligned with God, the Spirit was moving in this community, God responded, and I I was one of the numbers added to this community. So many of you were one of the numbers added to this community by God. So the question is, if you were outside of this community, are you willing to step in? Are you willing to step into a thriving community and give it everything you got, continually persevering with them, continually embracing an outward community purpose? And are you willing to eat with people? These are the questions you got to answer. And what does it look like to fully commit to this community? Let's open up our hearts in response to God right now. Jesus, thank you.